It's my turn now. I was asked to speak about legal perspectives. As a practical matter, it's my impression that with the exception of the lawsuits that I did in New Jersey over the last few years, there have been no significant successful lawsuits on behalf of children harmed at these facilities, with the exception of children who were killed or died. There are occasional cases with relatively small recoveries, but there are no significant recoveries, and that would seem to be surprising given what you've heard this morning and given what you've been told about the horror of what many of these facilities are. And there were really a couple of answers that really explain it. The plaintiff's injury field is a highly efficient field from an economic perspective. Lawyers gravitate towards cases where they can make money and gravitate away from cases where they can't, and are pretty good about figuring out which case is in which category. These cases are not money makers, and therefore don't get the attention of lawyers willing to put the kind of time and energy necessary to do them, because the kids who are sent to these facilities, by virtue of being sent to these facilities, are characterized, as you've heard today, as liars and manipulators. They are devalued simply by virtue of being at these facilities. And if when they leave these facilities, they're either doing well or they're not doing well. If they're doing well, the facility takes credit for it. If they're not doing well, they didn't work the program, and had they worked the program a little better, they would have been okay. That's the first reason why these suits don't get brought, and why I get phone calls all the time and spend extraordinary amounts of time with people, and at the end of the analysis tell them sorry. The second reason is that the harm that's done to kids who are sent off to these facilities takes a long time to manifest itself. Adolescents who come out of these facilities typically spend the first couple of years after they get out, in some cases becoming exactly what the facility said they would become if they didn't work the program. They go to drugs, they become more serious drug users than they were before they got there. Or they spend time desperately trying to reconcile with their families, the families that sent them off in the first place. Or they simply spend time trying to work the program. It's years later before they say, oh gee, that was a fraud. I was harmed, and I've been harmed terribly, and it's affecting me in awful ways in my life. And when they come to the lawyers at that point, it's too late, because statutes of limitations bar their claims. Nick Gallia talked to you about the kids program, and I was able to recover large sums of money on behalf of 5 of the victims of the kids program in New Jersey. There are hundreds of kids who went through the kids program who were also harmed in monstrous ways by that facility, who I was able to do nothing for, because more than 2 years had passed since they left. There are two, from my perspective, and this is different than the remarks that I had planned, and the reason I'm not going through the remarks that I planned in any detail is because I thought, having been at this for so long, more than 10 years now, when I discovered the kids program and the hideous straight program that preceded it and became part of the last generation of people fighting these programs. What's happened over this last 10 years is that this wonderful new generation has come along, including the people that you saw on the private panel, and now A-Start, and folks who are now saying exactly what it felt at some point was being said into the wilderness by the straight survivors and a few of us a while ago. And so much of what I had prepared has been said, and I'm not going to say it again, with a couple of exceptions. I will say 2 things. There are 2 changes that, if they were made, and they seem like common sense changes, would put this industry out of business. And they would put this industry out of business because they go to the heart of what this industry actually does. The first change is if this industry was required, at the time children were admitted to those facilities, to give children an actual diagnosis. Here is what we have found to be wrong with your child. And to have that diagnosis signed by a mental health professional or an educational consultant. Have that expert say, that licensed professional, I have concluded for the following reasons that your child has the following condition, and here is the treatment plan for that condition. Here is what we're going to do, whether it's wilderness or describe it, and have the parents sign off on that treatment plan. If that was required, this industry would go out of existence. It couldn't function because it does not provide treatment that's consistent with the standard of care for any known psychiatric illness that I'm aware of. That's the first. And in fact, if you look at the contracts that these programs provide, they invariably eschew any diagnosis at all. They talk about behavioral problems, they talk about changing behavior, but they're very clear about not providing treatment for any particular mental disability, despite the fact that the marketing which seduced the parents in the first place, or the diagnosis that the parents were living with, appealed to people whose children had those very conditions. The second change, if in fact children were told that they had, if children had the absolute right to send letters and receive letters and communicate with their families and make phone calls and write letters to relatives and receive letters to relatives and make regular phone calls that were unmonitored in both cases, this industry would cease to exist. Cutting off communications between children and their families is the heart of the industry. And one of the reasons it's the heart of the industry is because the cutting off of communications, in fact, appeals to what parents want when they send their children away. And one of the things parents want, by and large, is a respite from the awful condition in which they find themselves. Now, I see time is running out, and so I'm not going to have time to develop that, other than to make this one final point. And the final point that I would make is this industry is all about meeting the needs of parents. And the parents of children who are in trouble are a scared and frightened group, and they are a very, very mixed bag. It is terrifying to be the parent of a child who's in trouble. And the parents of children who are in trouble run the whole gamut. If you think that parents who send their kids away are wonderful people who have done everything they possibly could and have reached the end of the line and have explored all of their alternatives, you will find lots and lots of proof to support that understanding of the kids that get sent away. If, on the other hand, you believe that the parents who send their kids away are immature, selfish, often parents only concerned that the kid is going to turn out like the bastard they finally got rid of, in a divorce, you'll find plenty of proof for that also. And with time up, I will be more than happy to continue this discussion with any of you during when we're finished, and I want to turn it over to Maya.